goodness.
It hit a judge in the neck, and so he got disqualified for not controlling his anger.
Wow, that's not good. I thought it was an accident at first. I go, why is he being kicked out? It was an accident, but I guess it
Well,
wasn't.
no,
an
it was, but
accident.
you're supposed to. It was, but you're supposed to control. You're not
Oh,
supposed to do
absolutely.
that. You're
Sure.
not supposed to do that. This isn't. This isn't the WWF.
Wow, my goodness. Well, it's exactly 7:30 right now on my watch. What is it on yours? Is it 7:32?
7:30.
Okay.
All right. As soon as Samara tells me that we're live, then
we'll go forward. Okay, sounds good.
Because we're live on that.
We'll have Carrie and Maimona join us afterwards when they come on board.
They're here, George.
We're here.
Oh, okay, good, perfect.
You need to set your view to tile, George.
To what, tile?
Yeah, so you can see all of us, except me. But never mind. I tried to tell you. Maybe someone else can show him how to do it. Ton, show him how to do it.
I like having a small picture.
Maimona, stop laughing, Maimona.
Just smiling.
Oh, you're laughing with him, not at him. Oh, we could be live. Are we live?
Now we are.
Oh, Maimona, you're great.
That's good. That's good. Okay. Okay.
We're ready to go, George.
Okay, good. Okay, welcome everybody. We finished closed session and we're now in open session. And we started with item number 3 on our agenda for this evening, general matters. And we go to item 3.01, which deals with our flag salute. And I lost track of who has led us in the flag salute, but I'm going to have Ton lead us in this one. Ton, can you lead us in the flag salute, please? Go ahead. Okay, so Ton will lead us in the flag salute, so maybe we can all stand up. Let's all stand up at this point, and Juan has the flag in the background. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ton, for leading us in the flag salute. Very much appreciated. Okay, at this time, we go on to item 3.02 to approve, disapprove additions to the agenda. So if there are any, bring them forward. If not, let's go to item 3.03, approve, disapprove order of the agenda. And if nothing there, then we'll go to item 3.04, report of action taken in closed session. Superintendent?
Yes, the board unanimously approved the closed session minutes for the meeting of August 25th, 2020. There are no other actions to report.
All right, thank you, Superintendent. Let's go on to public hearing, and this is item 4.01. The public board hearing, learning continuity and attendance plan. So I'll turn that over to the superintendent to give us an overview of that plan.
Actually, so this is a public hearing as required by Ed Code in regards to our plan on how to support distance learning. And we wanted to give you a presentation on it. The board will not take action today. Today's the public hearing, and the board will take action at the meeting of the 22nd and then submit it to the county per Ed Code before the end of September. And Norma was scheduled to give the presentation. I don't see her on here. Okay.
She's having trouble with her link.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll start just going over some of the specifics about the plan, and then when she gets on, we can, if someone can you log, well,
Why don't we move on and then we'll and come back to it?
We'll, I'll get it started, and then when she joins in, she'll be able to catch up with us. So part of the requirement under the SB 98 is that the district draft a learning continuity and attendance plan that addresses two things. That gives outlines the plan for how we are going to support students doing distance learning. And also, even if we're not in a hybrid model or an in-person model, what we would do in the event that we were in an in-person model. So that's why you will see in the actual plan that we had to actually put in there what our plan would be if we were to bring students in person. And specifically what it asks is that we address the needs of students such as students with disabilities, EL students, foster youth, McKinley-Vento. Okay, move forward. Summer, can you move it? Okay. I'm waiting for, Summer's helping Norma, so I'm waiting for him to advance the slides. So part of the plan has to also align, if you saw there, the budget, the funding that we received under COVID-19 and how those funds are being used to address the loss mitigation and how do we support EL students, foster youth, and students with disabilities. This replaces the LCAP that we would have brought to you back in June. So instead of having the LCAP back in June, the state came up with the LCP and needs to be turned into the county by the end of September. I see you there. You're on, Norma. Do you want to?
I am so very sorry. I'm not sure what happened, but I am here, and good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Norma. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad that I'm here. So yes, thank you, Superintendent, for starting this for us. Yes, this is what the LCP is. I want you to know that the template was released on July 31st, and we had a month. All the school districts were scrambling to put together their LCP. The bottom line on the LCP, it was a way to memorialize all the work that we'd already been doing throughout the summer in preparation for the opening of school. So we didn't have to start from scratch. On July 31st, we merely had to collect the information that we already had and then start putting together a plan, paying attention to the LCFF funding that we are receiving for our unduplicated group.
Next.
See, how do I navigate? Okay, there we go. So these are the sections of the LCP, and you can see here what they are. The section that was the most, the one that went into depth was the distance learning section and the strategies to address learning loss. And I really believe this is the heart of the LCP, because the bottom line is this plan is supposed to guide our district and how we're going to address the needs of our students. Understanding that they have suffered some degree of learning since school closures began last spring. And then, of course, special attention to our English learners, our students who are on free and reduced lunch, our low-income students, and foster youth. So those are the three subgroups or the three groups that LCFF funds directly wants to support in all of our plans, whether it's the LCAP or the LCP. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if I'm driving. Okay, great. So one of the critical aspects of the LCP is to make sure that we have transparency and that we are engaging in conversations with our parents, our staff, and our students. And so this is, again, a list of the different ways that we engaged our families and our staff. I know that I've been to the board meetings with you to share much of that information. I shared some of the information from the surveys back in the spring when we documented what we had learned from our implementation of distance learning last spring. We had a series of town hall meetings throughout the summer, always informing our community what we were thinking, what questions they had, what concerns they had, and what ideas they had. Always holding these town hall meetings in the 3 languages of our community. On August 24th and 27th, we had one specifically for our parents of students with IEPs to answer their questions and to hear from them. And then we had a series of committees, a number of committees working throughout the summer, which you're very aware of. The 2 groups that needed to be part of the stakeholder engagement process for the LCP were the Superintendent's District Advisory Committee, which is usually the committee that has input on the LCAP, and then our District English Learner Advisory Committee, which took place just a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. So in the plan, we're required to describe our options. And the first option, of course, is our in-person instructional option, which we are currently not implementing it. But all districts, all LEAs had to describe what would in-person instruction look like when it is deemed safe to return to our campuses. And I had previously described that the recommendation from the committee was a hybrid 2-day AB rotation. If you remember, that's 5 days a week, dividing students in half in 2 cohorts at a school or in a grade level. And then when one group of students would come to school, say on Monday for in-person instruction, while the other half stayed at home for distance learning. And then on the following day, the students that were home in distance learning would be receiving in-person instruction while the first group was home doing distance learning. And so the 5th day was reserved for continuing with student check-in and making sure that we were supporting students, but it was dedicated for teacher professional development, meetings, planning, where all students would be home for distance learning. In the in-person model, if you remember, we still had an option for families and staff who were not comfortable coming to our campuses. And so we would still have that option. And then we had to list in the plan all of the safety precautions and protocols that we would follow, which we had previously shared with you in July. We are currently offering distance learning and we are teaching to our state standards. We are using our core curriculum. It is a combination of online synchronous instruction using Zoom and asynchronous instruction, which is made up of assignments from the textbooks, online learning, like from Lexia reading, different programs and apps that we're using. And we're always integrating social emotional learning lessons. That was a commitment that we made. And so every day starts with an SEL lesson with the class, with the students, and then it is woven throughout the day. And we're still learning on how to do that with the core curriculum that we have right now. And of course, we can't do this without having access to computers, to technology, and to making sure that students have their materials. And so students did receive classroom supplies. They have received their textbooks, including workbooks, and they have received technology. So we have equipped our families with what they need. And in fact, today we were even talking about it, how some families have even requested desks and tables, desks and chairs for their home to really create a learning space for their children. Next slide, please. So again, this is on the top section here is what was given to districts as the required minimum instructional minutes for our students. If you do the math, it's not more than 4 hours a day. And of course, this is a minimum. And then in conversations and negotiation with our Franklin-McKinley Educators Association, we determined how much synchronous time would be provided to all of our students. And you see the minutes there. You can see that it's a little bit more than half. And so teachers spread those minutes out daily. And we also provided our teachers and our principals with a suggested number of minutes per subject area. So for example, we gave more minutes for math instruction because we know that math is one of those subject areas that's most challenging for students to learn on their own. So we wanted more teacher contact time in math. And then social studies and science is mostly done asynchronously, but teachers weave it into their literacy lessons as much as possible. Next slide, please. So one of the requirements, of course, is what are we going to do that is unique and special for certain student groups? And protected ELD is happening for every English learner. We've really emphasized, since we adopted Journeys, our new ELA program at K-5, we've really emphasized with the trainers to really support teachers with how to provide integrated and designated ELD with the new adoptions. Designated ELD merely means that it's a protected time of the day, and integrated means that you're integrating it in everything else you teach, because that's the only way our students can really learn a language, is to use it and then to get some very specific lessons around language. We have a number of apps, as I described, and some of our apps have bilingual support, so that you can, toggle something on the app and it'll provide the instructions in Spanish or Vietnamese or other languages. So we're fortunate that in today's day of technology that we're able to do that. We also purchased some very specific programs for those newcomer students who really need more language learning. And so we purchased, we again renewed our contracts with Rosetta Stone and Imagine Learning. And then we're still working on gathering primary language resources for students and for families, because many of our families are having to support their children at home. And so what a great way to support children in doing it in a language that they already speak at home. And then the other thing that we're going to be exploring very seriously is what do we do for our students who actually need more help and can't get that help during the school day. So we're looking at extended learning opportunities during intersession. For example, we're having a week off in October. There are some, weeks and days during the school year where we might offer teachers extra duty pay to work with specific groups of students to give them more extended learning beyond what we're already providing. Next slide, please. For our students with IEPs, we are still legally required to meet their goals of the IEPs, and they are offered the same opportunities as all other children. So we provide the same services. They also received materials. They also picked up supplies. We're providing accommodations and modifications, especially knowing that we're doing this virtually. So how do we support our children in this virtual world? We provide materials as needed. So case managers or some of our program specialists, if they hear that a family needs some specific things for the home, we have made those available. Parent communication is very, very important for these students. And at times, the families themselves are on the Zoom calls or on the Zoom lessons, I should say, with their children, supporting them and learning with them. Dr. Galvarin has secured digital assessments for some of the assessments that need to be provided. And as I described before, we're hoping that we can, when it's deemed safe, that we can implement the assessment center. Some funding was spent to have an assessment center at every site, following all the safety protocols, so that when and if students need to be tested, they can come in for assessment. Next slide, please. For foster youth and our homeless for students who are experiencing homelessness, that's where our social workers are really a wonderful asset. Our 8 school social workers are supporting all sites. They are the first, when our teachers or principals have said, we can't get a hold of the family, they're the ones on it to make that communication. I actually think of them as a bridge because they really are able to connect with families and in those ways. They often help with securing a device if needed, or a hotspot, working with our IT department, um, connecting families to community resources for homeless children. Sometimes it's been, having to buy materials or supplies for them because maybe they don't have those resources. So really it's the social work team that really is the first point of the people that are most involved. But all of our principals and teachers understand and know that no student will go ignored because they're not available or they're not present in our distance learning world. So we do emphasize this, and we support as much as we can. Next slide, please. So one of the most important sections of the LCP was the big question: what are we going to do with what they call pupil learning loss? And when you think about pupil learning loss, you think of something that's been lost, something that's been missing. And so one of the things that we're being challenged with is to change that mindset and to really think about not what kids are missing, but what do kids need? How do we accept students, at the point where they're at? Because after all, it isn't their fault that we had to close schools, that we had to go into distance learning in the spring, that we are where we are. So we want to make sure that when we are approaching our educational program as we are, that we're looking at it as acceleration and how do we help our students grow as much as we can. Next slide, please. So some interesting information that was shared with us from the Santa Clara County Office of Education was that there was this research that was done from Brown University on learning loss. And often there is some degree of learning loss over the summer for all students because, they leave for summer break and they may not be engaged in as many academic or as many learning activities as they would have if they were in school. But with COVID-19, with schools closing in March and with then returning to distance learning, that poses a real challenge. And so what the research that was shared with us showed is that mathematics is the one subject that usually is where students are substantially behind, because that is the one subject that often some parents cannot help their children with, or it's just Common Core math is just so complex that it makes it very, very challenging for students to learn it on their own. And so we really need to think about math as being an area that we really have to focus on. We also know that we are going to have students at all different varied levels of skills coming back into our schools. And so, especially with COVID-19, the learning loss is going to be pretty significant. Next slide, please. So the strategy for this is really a three-part strategy. And the first strategy has to do with measuring where kids are at as they return back to school, so to speak. And what are our strategies for learning acceleration or for meeting students where they're at? And how are we going to monitor what we're doing? So the next slide, please. So one thing about when we think about measurement, where kids are at, we have to think of assessment. We know that many of our students take a number of different assessments. So the first 3 weeks of school, we have not assessed kids formally. We might have been doing it informally in classrooms. Teachers are talking to the students, having them read, listening to their comprehension, giving them activities. And so they are collecting information informally. And then there are tests that need to be given just to have a baseline of where we are. So we look at assessment in two ways. We think of assessment as assessment of learning and assessment for learning. And we think of assessment of learning when we give a test or an assessment to see what students know already. So examples of that might be like our SBAC or our CAS test that we give at the end of the year to see what students have learned. Or we teach a chapter or a unit, we give a test to see what students have learned from what was taught. So those are some examples of assessment of learning. But assessment for learning is when we intentionally collect information from the work that we're giving students to see what is it that that they know, and what did I do as a teacher to really impact that learning. And so one of the strategies that we're going to be working on in Franklin-McKinley is to really emphasize the assessment for learning, because we have to assume that students have gaps in their knowledge. And so we're going to get data on what they don't know as a group, or what they need to learn, I should say, but we also need to measure their learning every single day. So we don't want to wait for a month or at the end, the end of the chapter or at the quarter to see if what we're doing is working. Distance learning is a whole new way of teaching and learning. And so teachers are learning alongside with their students. And so it's important that teachers get that immediate feedback and that principals get that information about their grade levels and their students, so that we can adjust or change what we're doing right now. Next slide, please. So what we're going to use for this measurement is, the first thing we're going to do is, right now, during these next 2 weeks, students will be taking the Renaissance Star ELA in math. That is the same tool that we've used in the past. We didn't want to change to a new assessment. We thought about it because we've had some concerns about Renaissance that have come from teachers in past years. But we thought we don't want to put one more thing on teachers, but also it would be a good way for us to assess and compare data from from now to last March, because the students did take the assessment in March. But also it would be interesting to see how our students in general are doing compared to a year ago. So that will give us some big data points in terms of what it looks like to really assess how much learning loss and where is it. But we also want to give these assessments to gather information about where students are right now. What is the status of where they are? What are some of the standards that are really being highlighted as areas of need? So we're going to continue with the assessments that we've been given, and some of these assessments are summative in nature, and some of them are diagnostic. So that'll tell you very specific skills in learning, like for example, in reading, do they know their vowel sounds? Do they understand how to retell a story? Some very specific things. So it's going to be a combination of different kinds of assessments, and we're going to work with our staff on teaching our students and our principals the type of assessment that needs to be used for a very specific purpose. Next slide, please. So what do we do after we collect all that data? So this is part 2 of the strategy. We're going to look at that data, but we're also going to look at the priority standards. And so Achieve the Core has developed a set of standards that are the most important standards. So if we don't have a lot of time to get kids up to speed, then let's look at what's most important, knowing that we're not going to be able to teach everything. So we're going to look at priority standards. And the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out, where do you teach those standards in the curriculum? So take a priority standard, deconstruct it. Where do you teach it in Journeys? Where do you teach it in Eureka Math? Where do you teach it in CPM? How do you teach it? And so it's really working with teachers on mapping this. And this is a high order to be done in a very short time. So this is where a lot of our resources will be going in the next few weeks for mapping this out and working with teachers to do that. Sometimes I get asked, well, you have learning loss, so do you have to go back and teach the previous grade level? Our Common Core state standards are written in a way that they spiral through the grade levels. So we really are not encouraging that people stop and teach 2nd grade standards if I'm teaching 3rd grade right now, but rather teach 3rd grade standards, find out what students need, and then teach those areas where students need support, knowing that they are spiraling throughout the curriculum. But we also know that there are going to be students that are very seriously behind grade level, who are missing a lot of standards, and those students will need to receive maybe some an extended learning support for those students to give them the equitable opportunity that they need. Universal interventions has already been something that we've been doing as a district. Our Lexia reading program does that. Our guided reading process in the early grades does that. So we're looking at a math online intervention for that asynchronous time so that students get practice with some of the areas where they need that practice. And then I already talked about the assessment plan. We really need to define Franklin-McKinley School District's assessment plan that's going to drive our teaching. It's not just going to be assessment for telling us how students are doing, but we really need an assessment that's going to tell us what to do. And then again, looking at ways to extend learning opportunities. And that'll have to be done creatively in conversations with teachers who are willing to do extra time to teach the students who need more. Next slide, please. So this is part 3 of our strategy, and that is monitoring. And so we're going to have to continue to use those tests that we use to even diagnose where students are now. And so we're going to have to pay more attention to growth and looking at progress monitoring either weekly or in some cases every 6 weeks to see if students are actually making the growth that we expect them to make. And if they are not, then adapting the plan and doing something differently. Right now, I need to tell you, the teachers have an abundance of materials to use. And there really isn't even enough time in the day to use them all. So it's really going to be about prioritizing and really finding exactly what is going to be helping the student. Because what we don't want is try everything and see what sticks. We really need to figure out what exactly is what's working based on what our data is telling us. And then the structures to look at that data will of course be teachers working with their principals and their ILTs, their instructional leadership team meetings to really analyze their school data. That information will have to be brought, we at the district office will have to spend more time looking at data, kind of big, broad view of it. And then we have our curriculum instruction and assessment committee, which is made up of teachers who will also have an opportunity to look at that data. They are representatives from the different schools who meet with our director of curriculum instruction to also have a voice and to really see how we're doing as a district. Next slide. For mental health and social emotional well-being, which is just as important as the academics, we have a mantra now, SEL all day, every day, and for everyone. This is really about our staff well-being, our adult care. The adults, we can't work with our kids if we as adults aren't taken care of. So we have an employee assistance program that we really want to make sure that our staff is aware of and are using as needed, that provides counseling. We from time to time practice mindfulness, even in our meetings with principals. There is a daily student check-in, as I described, every morning. Teachers are checking in with students. We are now using Second Step district-wide. Last year there were, I think, maybe 6 schools that was used, 6 schools, Juan?
8 schools, and now we have all 16. Okay,
so now we are a full-blown Second Step district with an evidence-based social emotional curriculum. We've adopted CASEL as our framework, so there's going to be some energy being placed there to really make that framework our framework. Students have access to the school link services. And then of course, we're going to talk about re-engagement strategies in a few minutes, but we want to make sure that students are not missing from distance learning and that they are really feeling that they are engaged with their peers and with their teachers. For monitoring on social emotional, we often have relied on the Children's Healthy Kids Survey that gives us information every year. And we're still exploring whether we want to use a different tool or another, in addition, a different tool to maybe get other pieces of data that we can triangulate with the Children's Healthy Kids Survey. Next slide, please. So I'll turn this over to the superintendent, who's going to talk about participation and engagement, because that is required as part of our distance learning approach.
So one of the things the state wanted to ensure was in this model of distance learning, even in a hybrid, students would have been, part of it would have been in distance learning and some of it in person. So how do we make sure that we're not just taking attendance. You know, in the past, a student was in the classroom, was marked present, was not in the classroom, was marked absent. Well, nobody is in any classrooms right now, right? So they're all virtual. So the state is having districts to collect data in both ways. They want us to collect data from an attendance standpoint, which students showed up for whatever time and they're marked present. But above and beyond that, the state says you need to monitor how students are doing in distance learning, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, whether it's with engaging with the teacher or engaging on the online self-paced programs. And so the state put out guidance around that. The state put out a suggested template. And just today, we were able to meet with FMEA and get an agreement from our MOU on the process that we will, how we will collect that information here in FMSD. Part of that is making sure that we have an opportunity to re-engage students that are not participating and not being successful in distance learning. So the law says that in any given week, a student that does not meet the 60% threshold of completing and participating in distance learning, we have to have some steps in which we have to re-engage students from that standpoint. And we have to obviously communicate with families on a regular basis. So the re-engagement, next slide. So this is our tier re-engagement. So we have levels of re-engagement, even from the very first absence that the student has. We go through our regular process where secretaries call the home, you know, why didn't the student participate? You know, maybe it was, you know, they're sick, or, you know, doctor's appointment, or the internet was not working, their device is not working. So we're collecting data right off the back. And then as the students are missing more time, then it gets escalated and more people are involved. By the time the student misses 3 or more absences, has 3 or more absences during the week, then there's another level of engagement where, you know, we're talking about the social workers, we're talking about the staff here at the district office, we're doing home visits. We just are finalizing our home visit protocol to ensure that when we do that, it is safe. So this is sort of what the state is asking is, you know, you can't wait, you know, 2 to 3 weeks before you re-engage with a student that is missing because of issues with distance learning. They want us to start early and making sure that we are addressing any barriers that may be keeping the student from participating. Next. And so I'm gonna have Jason talk about school nutrition.
Yep, thank you, Superintendent Cruz. School nutrition, we are still feeding our kids. We are reaching out to families to let them know that even though our school doors are closed for in-person instruction, we're still making meals available for students through our parking lot, through a grab and go model. We started this model back in March and we've continued it through the summer, and we're continuing again in this new school year. We are serving breakfast, lunch, and dinners on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at most of our sites. And thankfully, the federal government allowed seamless summer option available to all school districts from the state of California again. So that means any student under the age of 18 gets a free meal from the district. This is set to expire in December. So we're continuing with our application process to become a community eligibility provision district. Most of our school sites, if we are approved, will be able to serve free meals to students after December. Next slide. Of course, we're continuing to follow all public health guidelines. So we're making sure that employees are staying 6 feet apart, and also 6 feet apart from those accepting meals, making sure that everyone wears a face covering, whether it be a face mask or a face shield. Staff members are wearing using gloves, and we've also put markers around the distribution area so that people know that they need to remain 6 feet apart and practice good social distancing practices. That's it.
And so, as we had mentioned before, we were able to work with Coral to provide a full day support program at 10 of our schools. And so we are able to serve up to 500 students through this model, where students are kept in consistent cohorts of 12 with no more than 2 adults supporting each of those classes. And it is a 7-hour program. The employees are working 8 hours. And so a half hour is, to check them in, get them ready. They have the students' schedule of when they have to log into Zoom. They have the platform, they know what platforms they have to log in for asynchronous. So this provides a level of support for students in person. And obviously, this was one of the things that our families were really asking for, because of the fact that, many of them having to go to work, returning back to work, and therefore nobody to supervise them at home. So we're very fortunate to have this program running now in its second week, and things are, running smooth. We actually also made referrals to the rock and roll program that the city is running out of the community centers and the library. And they started last week with some referrals from us at the community center in Seven Trees. As soon as that is full, they will open the Tully Center and we can make additional referrals there. And Jason is going to talk about this one.
Okay, so to continue to do this in the best way possible and be able to afford to do it, the state and federal government have made available to us several, shall we say, buckets of money, relief funds during this distance learning model. And those funds, as usual, come with some restrictions on what they can be utilized for. So this and the next slide go over 4 basic areas on where we can use restricted relief funds. The first area being addressing learning loss, which we've talked about already during this presentation. And also we can utilize the money to extend the instructional day or increase the amount of instructional time for each of our students to help mitigate learning loss. Next slide. And the last 2 areas are to provide additional academic services to pupils, such as assessments, devices, also connectivity through hotspots. And lastly, providing integrated pupil supports to address other barriers to learning, such as provisions of health, counseling, mental health services, PD for teachers, and so on. That's it. This slide here is to show you the different buckets of money under COVID-19 relief funds and how much we are receiving under each different funding stream. When do we need to spend it by, and the uses for those funds. And those areas are learning loss mitigation funds, governor's emergency education relief funds, Prop 98 coronavirus relief funds. This is the state's portion of their coronavirus relief funds that are going out to school districts, and then the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund, the ESSER funds. One of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest challenges is making sure that we can effectively utilize all this money before the certain spending dates come upon us. The one that we're working with now is the learning loss mitigation funds, which has to be spent by the end of this year. That's it.
So moving into the next slide, the bullets on the previous slide are really a lot of money that we've already spent on Chromebooks, on hotspots, on Zoom. I mean, everything that we needed to launch distance learning was afforded by the use of those relief funds. But in the LCP, we also have to remember that we need to pay special attention to our English learners, our low-income students, and our foster youth, because that is who LCFF, that is who we need to be thinking about as we write our LCAPs and our LCP. So part of the requirement is that we have to take up a portion of the LCFF funds that go above and beyond the base of LCFFs. And so for this year, it was 29.95%, which was over $15 million. So we have to make sure that we're using $15 million $15,993,138, principally directed to supporting students above and beyond for English learners, low income and foster youth. And so what you see here is a list of some of the expenditures, some of the ways that we are supporting our unduplicated students. On this slide, we have to make sure that the funds are spent with the needs of these students in mind first, but it doesn't mean that other students can't access the services of any of the items here on the bulleted list. For example, I'll just use technology. I mean, we know that we needed to purchase a significant number of devices, but we didn't buy them just for the students, whether they were EL, low income, or foster. If a student was not identified as one of those student groups, they also received a device. And so basically, we have to justify in our LCP that while we spent the funds with these students in mind, that other students could benefit as long as we were thinking of these students' needs first. The next slide represents improved and increased services. So what, as part of that $15 million, what specific things did you spend money on to support any of those three groups? And so these are just some examples of some very specific things. I mean, we're supporting our sealed schools that have the highest number of ELs with some professional development and planning. As needed, we purchase supplies for foster and students who are experiencing homelessness. We've used those funds to offset the cost for our lunch meals. And so again, these are just some very specific actions that we have to identify in our LCP. And so this is the end of our presentation today. Again, today was just a highlighted big kind of getting on the balcony view of what went into the learning continuity and attendance plan. So we are available now for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for giving us that very pertinent information. I'd like to ask the board members if they have questions at this time. Board members, you want to go ahead and ask questions at this time?
I had submitted some questions, but the question I wanted to ask right now, thank you also for the thorough presentation. The question I had was, since this is kind of replacing the LCAP for this year, how will the board be provided updates? Like in terms of the data, I know some of the data that we're collecting, at what point will the board receive updates on that?
I don't think that the state or the county have delineated like you have to report 3 times a year, but we're happy to do that.
Okay.
We're happy to do that. And I think it's important to do that, especially because, as I mentioned earlier, we've never done this before. And so we have to learn together from what we're implementing to see what's working and what's not.
And Norma, correct me if I'm wrong, the state has indicated that we will be required to do an LCAP, but it will be later. I think it was December when they had initially.
No, this replaces it.
So now we're not doing that in December.
So no LCAP due in December. This took the place of. But we will probably have to do one next year. Okay. And what I've heard is they're going to take components of this LCP and put it into the LCAP. So we have to report, just like we used to always have to report on the past year. We'll have to report on the previous year's implementation.
Okay.
I believe the only thing that's additional in December is the adoption of a budget overview for parents.
Yes, that is true.
So, but we're happy to bring back, if you want, just to check in on obviously we can do it on a monthly basis on some of the key components as in regards to participation in attendance. I think that's going to be a good data point for us to bring back on a monthly basis. A report on ensuring that students have connectivity devices and connectivity. I think those are 2 critical ones that we can very easily, based on how we're setting up the data in the system, for us to report back to the board. And then certainly we can look at where the assessments, when the assessments are going to be provided, and then bring some of that analysis to the board when those are administered.
So will any of this now replace what was previously put in like the SIPSAs, or are those not going to be happening?
No, the SIPSAs are still going to continue. So what we've asked the schools is to reconvene a school site council meeting as soon as possible so that they can go back to their SIPSAs and look at what they had put in there in terms of activities, expenditures, that because we're in distance learning cannot be provided anymore, and make adjustments to their SIPSAs. And so those we can bring back to the board just for a review and ratification with the changes so that you know what changes they've made since you approved them in June. And so they have to engage with their community and then think about what data points they had put in there that maybe are no longer available. You know, it's like if they had obviously done the smarter balance, we're not going to have data to benchmark against because we didn't give it. So they're supposed to go back into their SIPSAs and reevaluate all of them based on our current situation.
Okay, great. And thank you for getting back to me on the questions. So I'll leave the rest of those questions for this item if we could just submit them for the record, since I know they're coming back, and it's fine to include them on when it comes back as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maimona. Other board members, Rudy, did you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Tan?
Yeah, question on the learning loss mitigation funds. So the one that's coming from the CARES Act that expires, I think, 12/30/2020. Are we set to use all those funds by that date, Jason?
Most of those funds will most likely be utilized, especially considering the large amount of devices, Chromebooks, iPads, hotspots, and the service related to them are going to cost us. So most of those funds will be utilized by 12/30. There may be a chance that some of it is left over, but we're working diligently on making sure that we utilize these funds in an appropriate manner to help benefit our students and our staff.
Those are one-time funds, right?
If I could add, I know that there's a lot of advocacy right now that is out there asking the state to have us extend that date simply because it is coming up really soon, and certainly, you know, we could definitely use funds for the full year. And so I can tell you that there's a lot of advocacy. CSBA, AXA are actively in Sacramento pushing for an extension on that date.
Well, considering they just dispersed the funds in early September, and giving us only, what, 4 months maybe to utilize those funds doesn't sound realistic at all. So hopefully that extension does come in. And in that case, would we get more money, or do we just have more time to spend it wisely?
There's more time to spend it.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan. Carrie, did you have any questions?
Yeah, just regarding the social emotional learning and the extended learning after school, are students with IEPs or special needs also being considered for those services, or how is that being done, I guess?
Yeah, so all students would be eligible for that, just like we did with Coral. All students were eligible, and so now we're supporting students that have IEPs within the Coral program as well. And so we can't deny access simply because the student has an IEP. We have to think about what is in their IEP, how we can support them and the services that we're providing.
Okay. No other questions.
Thank you, Carrie. Just had a quick question in terms of the local control continuity plan, and I know it's for select groups of students. What are we looking at in terms of percentage? Is it 10% of the kids, 15%, 20% that are being impacted by this continuity plan?
I think what is our unduplicated count, Jason? Isn't it like 82% or something?
It's around 81%.
So that means 82% of our students represent one of those designations.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so for us, that's
Quite
why
a bit.
that's why we're able to spend dollars across the board, because we
Okay.
have such a high number, right?
Yeah.
Districts where they have 50% or 40% unduplicated count, they actually have to really delineate the impact that these funds are having on those particular students. So, you know, we have greater flexibility simply because just of the high percent of students that qualify for those services and those funds.
Okay, that's good. Well, it's good to see the amount of funding, you know, that's come through uh, for the kids. That's great. Great news. Anything else, board members? If not, we want to thank all of you, and you particularly, Norma, for all the information that you brought to us regarding the local control continuity plan. It is very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Juan, after this, this is not we don't have to vote on this, do we?
No, this is just a public hearing. The
Okay.
vote will come at the next board meeting.
Okay, real good. Thank you once more to everyone for your input. Thank you. It's very much appreciated again once more. Okay, at this time, let's jump forward to item number 5, which deals with oral communications. Members of the public can address the board on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board or agenda items. Members of the public may also address the board on consent items before the board's consideration of the items. In accordance with board bylaw 9323, individual remarks will be limited to 3 minutes each unless otherwise stipulated. No action can be taken on any agenda item at this time. Questions may be referred to administration or put on a future agenda. So we jump to 5.01, which deals with oral communications. Superintendent, do we have anybody that wants to talk to us this evening?
We have no request for public hearing, oral communication.
Okay, real good. All right, thank you. Let's go on to consent items. These are consent items under $25,000. And again, members of the public can address us on these consent items. They will be given 3 minutes for their remarks unless otherwise stipulated. So we have item 6.01 through 6.03. Board members, are there any of these items that you would wish to pull, or otherwise I'll need a motion in a second?
I'd like to pull item 6.02.
Okay, so 6.02 will pull. All righty. And so we'll make that action item 8.09. Okay, any other items that you wish to pull? If not, I'll need a motion, a second on the two items that are left.
Move to approve consent items 6.01 and 6.03.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second to approve item 6.01 and 6.03. And again, we'll do a roll call. So let me go ahead and have Carrie, if you can vote, Carrie.
Aye.
Okay, Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye too. So that motion passes unanimously. Those two items pass unanimously. Okay, let's go on to item number 7. Number 7 deals with consent items over $25,000. And again, the public can address us on any of these items. They will be given 3 minutes for their remarks unless otherwise stipulated. So we have items 7.1 through 7.05. And board members, if you look at those items, is there any that you wish to pull for discussion? If not, I'll need a motion and a second.
Move to approve consent items.
7.01 through 7.05.
I'll second.
All right, so we do have a motion to approve items 7.01 through 7.05. And again, I'll take roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Aye.
and George. And I vote aye too. So that motion passes unanimously. Okay, real good. Let's go on to action items. Let's go on to item number 8, 801, our personnel report. So Vice President Maimona, if you could read that out to us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I move that the personnel report be approved as submitted and that A, the employment for the following employees be approved. Cynthia Nguyen, teacher McKinley, effective August 12th, 2020. Stephanie Gomez Perez, paraeducator bilingual Meadows, effective September 2nd, 2020.
All right, thank you, Vice President. Let's go ahead and vote on that.
Second.
Item 8.01. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
You did need a second on that, so I don't know who
Oh.
seconded, but I vote aye.
and Mimona,
Aye.
and I vote aye on that. Who did the second on that one? Do we have a second?
There was no
No.
second.
I
There
snuck it in
was-
the last minute. The second.
Ton.
Ton.
Ton was the second.
Okay. All right, thank you. So that number 7 does pass. I'm sorry, 8.01 does pass unanimously. Okay, let's go on to item 8.02. This is the board meeting minutes. So if you want to take a look at the board meeting minutes of August 25th, 2020, board members.
Move to approve the August 25th board meeting minutes.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second to approve item 8.02. Let's do a roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Aye.
Mimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye. So that passes unanimously. Let's go to item 8.03. District certification of unaudited financial report for 2019-20. Jason.
Yes, every year, as we finish the books for the previous year, in this case 2019-20, we bring to the board the SACS financial report for certification. So this is a typical process that we do each year. Just as a very high level summary, our unrestricted general fund has an ending balance of 19.5 million, which provides the foundation for the state to meet its obligations in the next year and 2 out years. So that's 2021, 21, 22, 22, 23. So at this point, we're bringing this forward. I would recommend that the board certify the SACS financial report, which we would then send to the County Office of Education for their review.
Thank you, Jason. Any comments on that, board members? If not, I'll need a motion, the second item, 8.03.
Move to approve action item 8.03.
Second.
All right, so we do have a motion and a second to approve item 8.03. We'll take roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Mimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye. So that does pass unanimously. Thank you. Let's go on to item 8.04, school consolidation process and timeline. Superintendent.
Yes, this action is not necessary from the board, but I
Okay.
believe that in full transparency, because we have been talking about school consolidation process, and that we would engage in that process this year with a possible recommendation for the board for school closure for the 21-22 school year. And it does have budgetary implications if we don't do that. I wanted to bring this to the board for discussion, and the board to give administration guidance in regards to next steps if indeed the board concurs with our recommendation that the process be postponed until next year, simply because of the situation that we're undergoing with distance learning and not knowing the uncertainty about when will this be back to normal, and we'll need the schools to be able to spread students out. All those things I think are important for us to consider, and then the stress obviously that this brings about in terms of the whole community. So I wanted to make sure that the discussion was had with the board, and that the board gave us clear direction in regards to moving forward or postponing it for the next school year.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board members, did you have any comments, questions on item 8.04?
So just to be clear, Superintendent Cruz, this would mean that we are not looking at school closures for the following school year, the 2021-22 school year?
Correct. The recommendation, if the board were to accept this on this agenda item, would be to not close any schools for 21-22, and that we would engage in the process that we normally would engage in considering a recommendation for school closure until 21-22, which would mean no schools would not be closed until 22-23 at the earliest.
Okay, and in terms of the budgetary impact, so since this was accounted for as a potential, budget, as a way to save money, so does that mean that now our budget will need to include additional cuts to account for that money?
Or prioritization of cuts, because as you recall, the 45-day budget that Jason presented, we did look a little bit better in next year, or this year and next year. We still don't know what the full impact of COVID is until the probably January governor's budget. But if we needed to continue to make the level of cuts that we had projected, then yes, there will be something that would have to come from somewhere else. Jason,
Okay.
you want to add anything to that?
I just want to piggyback off of what you already said. Yes, what we try to indicate in the 45-day budget revision is that the budget outlook, the revenue for the 3 years was increased considerably. So the level of cuts that we had earmarked when we adopted our budget can be reduced. And obviously we want to go through a thoughtful process about what this means for us going forward. So we'll engage in budget advisory committee meetings, as well as talking with staff at various levels to figure out what makes the most sense for FMSD going forward.
Thank you. I think so. Based on that information, I do think it's important for us to continue to engage in this conversation publicly, but for the time being, perhaps hold off on the conversation specific to this next school year with the amount of uncertainty, and even just looking at, how and when teaching and learning resumes in person. There's a strong likelihood that, even just the being able to social distance and the amount of space that could potentially take, it certainly would not be a good scenario to be in a circumstance, particularly for next year, which seems like it's right around the corner already. But just to have less space to do that, even if our enrollment, we know is declining. So I think at this point in time, that decision to hold off at this point, with the understanding that we should continue to help hold any conversation regarding this as transparently as possible with our public and with the community.
Hey, I just want to clarify this agenda item. We're not postponing closing any schools. We're postponing the discussion and process. Is that correct, Juan?
That's correct.
So there is not even any consideration to close any schools right now. There has not been. This is just postponing the process. We're not even there yet. And another item that related item to this regarding enrollment is that we don't know what it's going to be like after the COVID-19 issue is gone, and we return back to normal in-person.
Correct.
In-person classes. We might increase enrollment. So there are a lot of factors that could affect our school district and the enrollment. Doesn't mean that we're giving into the projections and saying that we're going to decrease enrollment. What it means is that we're just postponing the discussion. So I don't want I'm hoping that we don't have any rumors out there in the community that we're discussing closing any schools, because that's not necessarily true yet.
Right, and that's why I decided to bring this forward, because there were a lot of discussions out there and a lot of fear about the process, starting the process. And so, and every time I go to any of our smaller schools, that's the first question they ask. And so that's why I thought it was important for us, even though this is not a required vote action, but I thought for transparency purpose, and especially what you're saying, Rudy, is for people minds to be at ease in terms of where we are and what is it that we're doing and not doing in regards to this. So this is really about the process and letting everybody know that we're not engaging in that and we're not considering closing schools anytime soon.
Right. Thank you, Juan, and I appreciate you clarifying that with the community, because that's more important than anything, that we not talk about closing any schools yet, that we're just looking at a process. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Rudy. Carrie, do you have anything to say on this? Or
No
Okay.
comments.
Ton?
Nope.
Okay. And I just want to say that I do very much support the recommendation that we hold off on any action regarding closure of any school, especially because there are so many unknowns out there for this year, next year, and who knows for how long in the future. So we just can't move forward with any school closures at this time. So I'm very supportive of this action. So
Hey, George, I did
thank
have
you.
one. I
Yes,
did have
go
one
ahead.
additional question. Juan, are you hosting, or anybody in the district hosting any regular town hall meetings, like with the community? I know we held some when we were looking at the LCP, but
We-
are we holding any regular town hall meetings?
We are going to now schedule them monthly. So we're going to start calendaring those for monthly. And so we'll have town hall meetings that are specifically for staff and then specifically for parents. And the parents will
Okay.
be done in all 3 languages like we've been doing it before.
Okay, is it possible to develop like a statement in regards to this this issue, the process that we're postponing? That way everybody's on the same page and we communicate the same message to everybody.
Yeah. So what I was thinking is that just like we've done in the past when the board has taken action in some of these very important items, that we would do a press release format and send that out widely, just not just within our staff, but all our partners and general community. That was my plan.
Okay, good. I just don't want the terminology thinking of closing schools to even go out yet, because we're not even we're still looking at the discussion of it.
Yeah.
Rudy, anything else?
No, that's
Okay.
it.
Thank you, Rudy. Okay. All right, Juan. So this is 8.04. So you don't want us to take any action on this, right? It's just information then?
No, I did want, to be on record.
Okay.
The board, did take this action so that,
Sure.
it's memorialized and it gives the administration and the community a clear direction that this will be postponed.
Oh, great. Okay,
Yeah,
board members, I do need a motion, a second item, 8.04.
Okay, move to approve the postponing of the school consolidation discussion and process until the 2021-22 school year.
Second.
All right, so we do have a first and a second item, 8.04. We'll do a roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Hi.
and I also vote aye. So that motion passes unanimously. Let's go on to item 8.05, Community Wireless Project Proposal, Closing the Digital Divide. Who's doing this for us today?
So I bring this forward for the board to give us the authorization to continue to negotiate with Eastside Union High School District in regards to our opportunity to piggyback on the wireless community project that Eastside is undergoing with the city of San Jose. The way this works is that the city of San Jose and Eastside are putting up all the capital cost of installing the wireless network where the community students would have access from their home. So in future, we would not have to give, hotspots to any students. They just would have access from home, them and their families. Currently, the James Lake has already been in place, and those students have had access for the last year from their home. And what Eastside is doing and asking is that if school districts like ours want to have our students and our families have access to the wireless network, that we would contribute towards the maintenance of it in year 3, 4, and 5. So no cost or no expenses from us in the first 2 years of the service, and no cost from us in terms of the actual capital cost of actually installing the network. And we would explore whether bond dollars could be used to pay for this, or other funds if that was not the case. But I wanted to make sure that the board gave me the clear direction that this is something that you are asking us to move forward and fully negotiate a contract for us to participate in that. Yerba Buena High School will start the installation project in December. And so as soon as that is done, then students in that general area would have access to the wireless network. The next phase is Andrew Hill. And then at that point, all our students in Franklin-McKinley would have access to a wireless network with no need for hotspots.
Perfect. That would be great. Board members, any comments on item 8.05?
Quick question. One, the financial impact, you said to be determined. I thought the city of San Jose was absorbing this fully.
So the capital improvement, yes. So the city and the east side are putting up all the money to install. What it needs is every month, it's the maintenance of it. And so east side and the city has assured would cover the first 2 years of that. What we would be asked is to contribute our portion towards the maintenance of, based on the households we have, the maintenance for year 3, 4, and 5. In the MOU, there's a projected number, I think it's $344,000 over 3 years. So, a little bit over 100,000, but that's still wouldn't have to be negotiated and make sure that the way the calculation is done is per household within our boundaries.
And so regardless of the distance learning that we have going on right now, this will still be needed after that's all over?
Absolutely. I think that, one of the things we know is that our families, whether it's our students or our parents, need access to the wireless network for now basic needs. This has also been one of the reasons why we have not gone to one-to-one where students take the devices home, because we knew that a lot of them didn't have internet connection at home, and so there was no use for us to do that. And so once we do that, we will be able to implement that if we choose to.
And okay, so, and I think Maimona might be able to answer this. Why can't the city absorb all the costs to help support education in San Jose?
That's a good question.
That should have been asked, right, Maimona?
I don't think I have the answer to that because I'm not on city council.
No, but you were involved with the digital divide issue when they were talking with the city, and not only the city but also the county, weren't you?
Yeah, no, I can't say I disagree with you. I do think the cities and the county play an important role in supporting this project, and I think it's really at this point also showing, the fact that we are going to need digital access far beyond this pandemic. And so what does the district's role look like with supporting that long term, so that students can do, more at home, even like with homework. I mean, basically all resources, internet should be really like treated like a public utility. And that's just my opinion, because it's even just accessing things like our food banks and knowing where our COVID-19 testing sites are, telehealth and telemedicine therapies, those are all happening online right now. But a lot of that I would anticipate is going to continue. So in this day and age, I agree with you, Rudy. I think, the more we can get from our city and county to support this, because really it's going to extend beyond students. It does extend beyond students who need access to the internet to meet their basic needs. But at this point, I do think it's important that we emphasize as a school district that, digital access, specifically with access to the internet at home, is really essential for our students. So I would support moving forward with the negotiations with Eastside, specifically because they are in years 3, 4, and 5. Is that correct, Juan?
That's correct.
So, that gives us some time as well, hopefully, to increase our collective advocacy and, see what happens after those years, because this is a long-term thing, even beyond these hotspots and things that we're using right now, which is really a short-term solution. And, we're doing the best we can, but I think we need to have a plan long-term.
Is there a way that we could put in the MOU or maybe a separate letter to the city to the city of San Jose that we would like to we would like for the city to pay for it all?
So I think that part of, yes, I think we can always advocate for that. The city is putting in a large portion towards the infrastructure, and Eastside is paying the rest of it. So from a infrastructure and actually installing all the antennas and all the network, all that the cost is being absorbed by the city and Eastside through their tech grant. So what they're asking us to contribute, just so that our students have access, is for the maintenance of the network.
Okay, so and I'm not talking about the setup.
Right.
I'm talking about the ongoing costs.
Right.
I think we should ask the city to support education by supporting that digital access.
Right, and we are, and I think part of that, I think Ramona has a good point in terms of the city and the county. I think that right now there's a lot of attention in this area, and I think we have to capitalize and make sure that there's some investments in that from both state, the city and county, and also philanthropy. I know that we don't know exactly how much money, but there's a foundation that has said that they will be contributing towards some of it, and so that's why it's to be determined, because as we get more funding from various sources, then the contribution that the district would have to provide will be lessened by.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, until we pursue all those options, I'm not going to support the district providing any funding towards this, because I think this is we're the Silicon Valley. And, I think our local government and either industry should be able to support this. As far as it becoming an expense, a standing expense on our budget, because of, the digital access, we're also the poorest school district in the county, or one of the poorest. It should be, we should receive consideration to have this funded fully by the government or by industry.
I think we're talking about different sources, looking at different sources, of course, the city, the county, East Side, and then private industry out there to a certain extent. What I like to see is kind of see something that coalesces all these groups to really know where the funding is coming from, so we can feel more comfortable moving forward with a project of this nature. So we know exactly where the support is coming from to go ahead and close the digital divide. And we've talked about this and talked about this and talked about this many times, and we're still nowhere near where we should be. And so I don't know where that would come from. I guess maybe
Okay.
it takes somebody to step forward.
George, but let me clarify. I do support I do support us starting the negotiation process, and
Sure.
and actually getting the setup. I was talking about in the future.
Sure.
So we can deal with the agenda item right now, and I will.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's important to start something.
Sure.
Like Maimona said, but I don't think that it's wrong for us to ask for full funding.
Absolutely.
We're the
You're
Silicon
100%.
Valley. Come on.
You're 100% correct. That's true. I thought we would have this in place a decade ago, and here we are still struggling with this whole digital divide question. But anyway, anything else on this, board members? 8.05. Anything else?
I just wanted to clarify though, this is in terms of the discussion that's going, that we're deciding on whether to pursue the discussion of negotiations with East Side. That's not, at this point, we're not negotiating a permanent expenditure on our budget.
No.
It would just be for those 3 specific years. Is that correct?
Right. So what I needed is your approval for us to engage in some negotiations that we could then
Fine.
back an agreed upon MOU for your consideration at that point. It didn't make sense for us to go and negotiate something if the board had no interest in this type of project.
Thank you. And Rudy, I agree with you. I think I invite you to join, all the advocacy
Digital
efforts.
divide.
Because it's going to take, quite a bit.
Yeah.
We've made it this far and gotten some money allocated
right.
for a lot of short-term solutions,
Absolutely.
but really for the long run, even outlasting COVID, it's going to take a lot of investments, and that has to come beyond our school district. I completely agree with you.
I thought this was resolved already. I'm surprised that it hasn't been decided already. Unfortunately, we have people doing a lot of talking and no action, so that disappoints me. All right, so I move to approve item 8.05.
Second.
Okay, so we have a first and a second to approve item 8.05. Let's do a roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye. So that passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for a good discussion, and hopefully we'll get some good funding and have the digital divide disappear forever, so all our kids have access to the internet, a good internet. All right, let's go on to item 8.06. Resolution number 2020-50, the GAN appropriation limit. Uh-oh, that sounds like Jason.
That's right. Thank you. Under Education Code 1629 and 42132, by September 30th, the district's governing board shall adopt a resolution identifying their estimated apportionment limits for the current year and their actual apportion limits for the preceding year, which is 2019-20 in this case. The documentation used to identify the appropriation limits has been posted and is also attached here for your review. And this is an annual item that we do. This is really to Proposition 4 back in 1979 that was passed to make sure that we could limit the amount of spending from the state and local governments. And actually, I believe in 1987, there was an actual refund given to everyone within the state of California because the money exceeded the appropriation limits. And then I think right after that, Prop 98 was passed, and they ensured that any type of amount that was over the appropriation limit would go to funding school education. So we still have this here because it's still part of Ed Code, but it's something that we need to have approved by the board each year. We are not exceeding any of our appropriation limits, so there will be no additional funding going into Prop 98 under this, but we are bringing this to the board for approval.
Thank you, Jason. Board members, do you have any questions on this? If not, I will need a motion, a second, item 8.06.
Move to approve item 8.06.
Second.
All right, so we do have a motion and a second to approve item 8.06. Let's do roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's go on to item 8.07, resolution number 2020-51 in support of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer LGBTQ plus History Month. Item 8.07.
Yes, and this is an annual resolution that we bring forward. We will obviously work with our staff and being able to integrate this into lessons through distance learning. Obviously, activities that we normally would have in person, we won't be able to do, but we will do everything we can to bring awareness to our school community in regards to the contributions that the LGBTQ plus community have provided in our history.
Thank you, Juan. And we have done some nice activities in terms of this resolution when we passed it. And of course, we're limited this year because of the COVID-19. But I'm very glad that we're bringing this forward. Again, that we support all of our kids, all of our staff, with this resolution. Board members, do you have any other comments on this?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So I know you mentioned that in the past you've done activities in person. Is it possible to make some of those activities online virtually?
I mean, we can. I hesitate to put any more on our staff right now that are trying to figure out distance learning and all those things. But our staff are creative, and if when I check in with them, if they feel that they can actually pull some of those off, we will do it, and we will let you know. Right now, we're just being very careful in terms of exactly what we ask them to do, because they're taking in a lot of new things, just trying to manage distance learning. But I'll check in with them and see what they're thinking of things that we can do.
I think too, Juan, or Superintendent Cruz, there are a lot of teachers that I've seen share, amazing things that they're doing in classroom to promote, LGBTQ inclusiveness and including instruction on history. So I think even just putting it out there, and asking for teachers who are already including things like this in their classroom or lessons on this topic specifically, I think would be great to highlight or showcase if anyone already is doing that too, because I know it is happening. I've seen it. I've seen our teachers do amazing things with that.
Yeah,
already.
no, that's what I was talking about in terms of things that they're doing and that we would highlight. What we've done in the past has been the pride flag raising, and some last year I think we were over at Silverdale. We had a panel of students that talked about this. So those obviously take more coordination and more, even doing it in virtual, even more. So we'll see if we're able to do any of those, but certainly we want to highlight all the other things, that how they're integrating this into their curriculum and their activities. They're having students engage in discussion and promote those and be able to highlight those for sure. And especially right now, when it's so difficult and there's the potential for a lot of cyberbullying and these kinds of things, that it just hides the opportunity that we have to create inclusive, safe environments, even when we're talking about virtual world that we're engaging in right now. So we'll make sure that we highlight those, and we ask staff if they're doing something that they're we can participate, that we certainly want to extend that to the board and everybody, to that they're participating in those events as well.
Thank you, Juan, for that information. Anything else, board members, on this resolution? If not, I'll need a motion, a second.
Move to approve item 8.07, resolution 2020-51 in support of LGBTQ History Month.
Second.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second, item 8.07, and we'll do a roll call. Carrie.
Aye.
Ton.
Aye.
Rudy.
Yes.
Marmona.
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye. So that passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Let's go on to item 8.08, resolution number 2020-52, recognizing the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah, and
Juan, you want to?
Yeah, I'll defer this to Vice President Alberta as she brought this forward.
Yeah, I think, we are in distance learning, but it is important to highlight and emphasize. And I know that a lot of teachers are doing this already, but again, just providing an additional layer of board recognition that we do have a district, as a district, have a responsibility to, actively look at the systemic racism and history of Indigenous people in this land, of this country, and also combat a lot of the prejudice and work to eliminate discrimination that specifically come from the colonization, and also to be able to promote awareness of an understanding of the amazing contributions in history of Indigenous people. So I think it's another opportunity. I know sometimes our history books, tend to get, bogged down on one side of history or one perspective. And so this is an opportunity for us to really check ourselves to make sure that we are providing students with many perspectives and sharing the histories of all people. And the only other thing I would add is, I don't think I can see it right now. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad to see this come forward again, and hope that we can continue to, or I was going to say, with our ethnic studies initiative, I think this aligns really well with that. And there's definitely a lot of opportunities as we continue to look at the Ethnic Studies Adoption Committee, with aligning this work and potentially expanding this in the future as well, in terms of the resources that we're able to provide to our teachers and staff.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Maimona, for bringing this forward. Any other comments, board members?
Yeah, I just have a quick clarifying question. Indigenous is also including Native Americans, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm part Native American and I'm also part Indigenous, from Mexico. So I just wanted to clarify that Native Americans really don't call themselves Indigenous, but it's all right, because this used to be Mexico too.
And I guess that second Monday of October, that's Columbus Day too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
On purpose.
Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. And I would like to also note that that just a little fact regarding the COVID-19 crisis,
Yes.
that the Native American population has been the most affected population in the nation.
Wow.
Even surpassing the African American population demographic. It's the Native American demographic that has been affected the most. And sometimes it's not
Sad.
recognized.
Yes. No, I've read some articles on that too, Rudy. It's very sad that we have our Native American population being impacted so much by this COVID-19. All we can do is hope that things will change for the better in the future for all. All right, so on item 8.08, I do need a motion and a second.
Move to approve.
Go ahead, Maimona.
Move to approve item 8.08, resolution 2020-52, recognizing the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day.
Second.
Okay, so we do have a first and a second on item 8.08. So let's take roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye too, so that passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Let's go on to item number, oh no, I have one more. Actually, let me jump back up to item 6.02, which is now action item 8.09. So that's the monthly warrant report for the month of July 31st, 2020. Maimona, did you want to address this? You pulled it, right, Maimona?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I just wanted it to be a separate action item so that I could abstain from this particular item during the vote for
All
conflict of interest reasons.
Okay.
Potentially.
All righty. All right. Thank you, Maimona, for letting us know. So we have that item, which is 8.09, 6.02, which is action item 8.09. So I'll need a motion and a second on this item.
Move to approve action item 8.09.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve action item 8.09, formerly consent item 6.02. Okay, let's do a roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Abstain.
okay, and then George and I vote aye. So that resolution, I'm sorry, that motion does pass 4-1, 8.09. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so that does complete our action items. Let's go on to item number 9, which deals with communication from the superintendent. Superintendent.
Yeah, not much else to report other than, the fact that we are in our third week. And our staff are trying their best, and our parents are trying their best. Students are trying their best. And so certainly commend everybody in the district and the board and the whole community to trying to make the best out of the situation and making sure that our students are being taken care of for sure. And we'll continue to, make sure that we're addressing any gaps that may come up, and we are hoping that some of these devices that have been held up get here quickly. And if they do, then we can report back to the board at one point that every single student in our district has a Franklin-McKinley device. As of this morning, I believe we'll be able to cover every student that needs a device. But I would like to report at one point that every student has a device that has been issued by us for them to use at home. So we will continue to work with our staff in making sure that they're providing the best distance learning experience for our kids. And our attendance is high, but now we have to sort of gauge at what the engagement is. And so the tool that we just gained agreement with FMEA will help us gauge that level of engagement and be able to report back to the board.
Thank you, Superintendent. Let's go on to item number 10, communications from the Board of Education. And we go to item 10.01, board member reports. So I guess I'll go down my roll call list. Carrie?
No report.
Okay, Ton?
No report.
Rudy?
No report.
Maimona?
No report.
And George? I have no report. So that was pretty quick. Thank you, everybody. Let's go on to item 10.02, agenda item requests. So board members, if you have any agenda item requests, you can bring them forth at this time. If none, let's go on to future business, number 11. Let's go on to number 12, future meeting dates. And we have a 12.01, a board retreat to be determined. So hopefully all of you return your dates to the superintendent so we can get that off the ground.
So, Board President,
yes.
Everybody did respond, and so we've identified September 28th.
Oh, okay, good.
As the date for that. So we'll send out, obviously, confirmation with that, but I just wanted to.
September 28th.
Yes.
What day is that?
It's a Monday.
Monday, okay, perfect. Monday. Okay, good. I don't think we've ever had a retreat on Monday. All right, September 28th.
Yeah, since there's no Fresno State football, I guess any day's okay.
just Monday Night Football. We just have to record that. All right. Let's go on. Let's go on to item 12.02 would be our meeting date. And then September 22nd is our next meeting date for this month by remote. October 27th, 7 p.m. remote. We have one board meeting in October. And then 12.04, November 10th, 2020, 7 p.m., another remote board meeting. Closed session, we're not going back to closed session. And so we go to item 14, adjournment. So I do need a motion, a second for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Sure. Second.
We're all rushing to get out of here.
Did I get a first? Who did first? Did we get a first?
You can mark any of us.
All of us at one time.
Rudy, Carrie.
Okay. All right, first and second. All right, okay. Let's go on. Let's take roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Ton, Rudy,
Yes.
Maimona,
Aye.
and George. And I vote aye too for adjournment. So we adjourn at this time at about 9:14 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you for all the great information you presented, Cabinet. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.